We're going to take a look at the dimension tools in Autodesk Revit and several different ways that we can modify our objects to get the exact sizes that we're looking for. The first thing I want to point out is that when you are drawing with a wall, you will get some temporary dimensions as you're drawing. So one way that you can get accurate walls is to just move your mouse until you get the exact value that you want. One thing you'll notice is that right now I'm drawing at 6-inch increments, and the increments that I'm drawing at is all relative to how far I'm zoomed into my drawing. So if I zoom in a little further, still at 6 inches, a little further, now you can see I'm drawing at 1-inch increments. And if I keep zooming in, eventually I'll be drawing on fractional increments because I'll be so close. So that's the first way you can kind of eyeball it. If I wanted a 4-foot wall, I can move my mouse until I've got 4 feet, and then click. But as you can see, that was taking a little bit of time to get it exactly where I wanted. So another choice that you have is to just simply type in the value as you're drawing. So I can just type 4 and enter, and I'll have a 4-foot wall. As you can see, Autodesk Revit defaults to feet. So if I want to come up 5 feet, then I'll move my mouse up and type 5 and enter, and so on. So another way that you can dimension also is to dimension after the fact. So rather than try to draw perfectly accurate to begin with, you can just create your shapes and then come back and dimension it afterwards. So let's say I wanted a 10-foot by 20-foot building. So I'm just going to draw in the neighborhood of 10 foot. I'm not going to worry about getting it exactly right, and in the neighborhood of 20 feet-ish. And then I can finish up this shape. Then I can come back and work with some temporary dimensions. So a temporary dimension happens when you click on an object that you want to move. So if I want to change the overall width of this building, I'm going to do that by either moving the right side wall or the left side wall. So I've got to decide one of these walls is stationary. Let's say the left wall is stationary. I'll click on the right side wall. When I do so, I get a temporary dimension down here at the bottom. And I can click on that temporary dimension and type in a new size, 20 feet for example. So same thing if I want to control the lengths of the walls going this direction. I want to think of it in terms of I'm either going to move this wall or this one, whoops, in order to set it to 10 feet. So let's say the bottom one's stationary, I'll click on the top wall and I can adjust this value to 10 feet. So I did put in a 20-foot and a 10-foot. You can see those when I click on these walls. However, if you look closely at them, these dimensions are center to center on these walls. And when we're dealing with exterior walls, we want to dimension to their exterior surfaces. So I'm going to have to adjust these dimensions a little bit. And the way you do that is by clicking on these little dots on their witness lines. If I hold my mouse over it, you'll see Move Witness Line. So you won't click and drag, you'll just click on that dot. And when you click on the dot, it'll cycle between the inside surface, the outside surface, and the center line. So I'm going to click each of those until I have the outside surface. And now I'll set my value to 20 feet. So now I know that I've got 20 feet from exterior surface to exterior surface. So same thing going up and down. I'm just going to click this little witness line until I have exterior to exterior, and then I can set 10 feet. Sometimes you get a temporary dimension that you don't want and you might want to adjust it. For example, as I click on this wall, I'm getting a lot of weird temporary dimensions. Let's say for the sake of argument, I wanted to dimension this wall not relative to this wall, but relative to this one all the way over here. Then you can click and drag on a witness line and move it to a different wall. And now you can see this new dimension that opened up for me. So you can turn temporary dimensions into permanent dimensions so that they stay on screen just by clicking this dimension symbol that shows up underneath the value. So by clicking that symbol, I've now turned a temporary dimension into a permanent dimension. Here's something you got to watch out for with permanent dimensions. They stay on screen, but you can't just click the value to edit it. If I double click on 20, for example, it'll either move if I clicked it and accidentally got it to jog, or the dimension text dialog box will come up. And this dialog box lets you add prefixes or suffixes, but it doesn't let you change the values. So keep in mind that when you're changing a value, you're moving something. So you've got to click on what you want to move. So I've got to click on this wall first of all. Now you can see that value turns blue, and now you can see that I can adjust that value. So you just have to remember to select the object first, then you can adjust the size. Another way that you can place permanent dimensions is to actually create them yourself. And you can do this with the aligned dimension tool. This is available in a couple of different spots. If you go to the Annotate tab, there is an aligned dimension here. There's also a linear dimension. The aligned works better because it basically is picking two parallel lines to dimension. The linear picks points, so it's a little less clear on what you're dimensioning when you use linear. So stick with aligned. And with the aligned, when you come in to dimension something, you can see right now mine's highlighting the center of that wall, and that's driven by my options pane right here. If I want it to go to wall faces instead, I can choose wall faces, and now I can see that wherever I hover, it's going to select that particular surface. Another neat little trick, even if I keep this on wall center lines, if you hold your mouse over a wall and you're getting the center line, you can actually press the tab key and it'll cycle between the closest surfaces. So that's another way you can jump to the wall surface that you want without actually changing your options. So again, same idea there with my dimensioning. Another thing that you can do too is you can lock a dimension. When you select that dimension, you can hit the little padlock that appears underneath it, and that will not allow you to change the values now. So even when I click on a wall, notice this value doesn't show up as blue and it's got the padlock. I can't adjust this dimension value. So that'll keep you from accidentally clicking and dragging and moving a wall when you do not mean to. I'm going to go ahead and unlock this dimension so I can show you how to type your values in. So, whoops, as I mentioned earlier, let me select this wall first. Revit defaults to feet. So if I want feet, 20 feet, I'll just type 20 and enter. If I want, say, 20 feet 6 inches, I can put in 20 space 6. So no need to type apostrophes or quotation marks for inches. Save yourself the typing and just put in spaces. So as you can see, that gives me 20 feet 6 inches. If I wanted, say, 20 feet 6.5, then I'm going to go 20 space 6 space 1/2. And now I've got 20 feet 6.5 inches. So it defaults to feet. And again, you can separate them with spaces instead of typing in the symbols. Now if you do want inches, for example, let's say this wall needed to be 9 inches, you can do that by just putting in 0 space 9. Or if I want to do it to another one, you could actually type in the inch symbol. So 9 inches. And that works too. So 2 different ways to tackle that if you're dealing with something that's less than a foot. So let's actually take a look at the tutorial house that you'll be working on. So you'll begin by drawing a shape similar to this, and then you will fully dimension it. And I want to give you a few tips for doing that. The first tip that I want to give you is to align any walls that need to stay lined up. So for example, this wall of the garage needs to be lined up with this wall of the house. So you're going to use the align command, and to do that you can go to the modify tab and you will find align right here. You'll also notice the keyboard shortcut of AL for align. So if you want to type in a keyboard shortcut, it's just 2 letters. You don't press enter or anything, you just type AL, for example. So in this case I'm going to choose align, and I want to line up the exterior surfaces of these walls. So I'm going to change my preference to wall faces. And when you're aligning, the first wall that you click is the one that stays stationary, and the second wall moves to meet that one. So I'm going to click, say, let me go back to wall faces again, this outside surface here, and I'm not getting the wall face, so I'm going to press tab to get it. So I'm going to choose that wall face, and then I'm going to come over and choose this wall face. And you can see I got lucky and lined them up pretty close together. So I'll go ahead and click that one, and they are now aligned to each other. And you'll also notice a padlock. I like to lock these together. And what that means is if one wall moves, the other one goes as well. So I'm going to escape a couple times to get out of that tool. Click this garage wall, drag it down, and you'll see the other one goes along with it. So I'm going to go ahead and align these two walls. This is a little more drastic. You can actually see it move this time. So this wall and this wall align together and lock. I'm going to align these two walls together and lock them. And then vertically, I'm going to align this wall with this one and lock it. And this wall with this wall and lock it. So the next thing I wanted to say about the tutorial is the tutorial actually tells you to not place permanent dimensions. I think that's a mistake. If all you rely on are these temporary dimensions, it gets very confusing and you might change a wall and not realize something else changed. So I would strongly recommend that you go ahead and put in permanent dimensions. So I'm going to use my Align Dimension tool off my Quick Access toolbar here. And I'm going to set this to wall faces since I'm dealing with exterior walls. And I'm just going to start on the left side of the house and pick all the outside surfaces of the walls. So again, it's important that you're picking the outside surfaces when you do this. Then I'm going to dimension up and down as well. Now I only have to dimension one side of the house because I aligned all the walls on the opposite side of the house. So now I have my dimensions and I know I've got everything aligned together. So my recommendation to you when you're working with changing dimensions, pick a direction, work left to right for example, and say that the first wall is in the correct spot. So I'm going to say this wall is in the right spot. I'm going to move on to the second wall. So I'll click this wall right here. Then you will see these temporary dimensions pop up, but I'm going to ignore them and only deal with my permanent ones that I created because I know they're outside to outside surfaces. And looking at the textbook, this first value is 28 feet. And again, both walls move together since they've been locked. And here's one of the problems that people get into. The next dimension is 17 foot 4 inches. And when I type 17 foot 4, it goofs up this first dimension. And the reason why it goofed it up is because I still have this same wall selected. So the workflow that you want is set in the value that you want to place this wall, then click on the next wall. Now I can change this dimension to 17 foot 4. Now I'll click on the next wall and I can set this dimension to 14 feet. Now I'll click on the next wall and I'm going to go 17 foot 4 for this next one. Then finally I'll click the last wall out here to the right and go 7 foot 4. So now all my left to right dimensions are perfect. Now I got to work up and down. So again, I just got to pick one of these surfaces and say it's in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and say this bottom one's in the right spot, which means I'm going to go ahead and click the next wall up from there and adjust this value. In this case, it is 2 feet. Then I'll click the next wall and adjust the next value, in this case to 4 feet. Then the next wall. In this case, my temporary and my permanent dimension are right on top of each other. I'm just going to zoom in close enough that I can get my permanent dimension and adjust that to 28 feet. Then I'll click my last wall and set it to 4 feet. So now I've got it perfectly dimensioned. We're going to do a lot of work with this house, so it also wouldn't be a terrible idea to go ahead and select the dimensions and go through and lock them all, because it's very easy to modify something and accidentally change the dimension when you don't mean to. So that is a quick look at dimensioning tools in Autodesk Revit and how to apply them to your tutorial exercises.